We're just about at time. If you could take your seats, we can go ahead and get started. This session is New Directions in Taiwan Studies. The direction you should be headed right now is towards your seat. And we'll hear from our 4 presenters today about which directions they're headed in their research. I'm Karis Templeman. I'm chairing this panel. I think you all know the drill by now, but you've got a total of 15 minutes for each presentation. I'll hold up the cards when you hit 5 minutes and 1 minute. We've got 2 presentations in person. Someone is joining us online. Is that Yicheng or Atin? Yicheng is joining us online. Okay, welcome. And then that will be followed up by Frank Mouillard's giving a pre-recorded presentation. And Eric is here. I just spoke with you. It's fantastic to see you. It's been a while. In the interest of time, let me just give you the floor.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Eric Chen. The last time I presented in North America was 3 years ago in UW. So it's good time to come back in the so-called post-COVID period. But we all know post is nothing to us in academia. So, but somehow I'm coming back in person. And this time I'm coming back for both presentations in conferences and also doing research on seafood consumption. So if you buy Taiwanese seafood in America, do talk to me. You can become an informant. I'm writing. I try to write about seafood consumption and production about Taiwan in the next 5 years. And so this is a relatively new project to me. I have a 3-year 科技部 MOST project since 2020, and this is the first time I can really go overseas for my study. And actually, I thought about this project, this tiny little project, a long time ago because I met a lot of aquaculture engineers or experts back to my time doing my doctoral research in 2014, and I feel like they were really proud of their experiences overseas. And also in Taiwan, I was very curious about what happened actually to them back to the time, maybe in the 80s, 90s, year 2000s, and so on and so forth. And so I decided to do a little bit of interviews with those experienced aquaculture experts during the time of COVID. In Taiwan, I was still lucky, fortunate enough to do personal, in-person, face-to-face interview with them. And I'm also lucky enough because some of the experienced experts cannot go anywhere except Taiwan during the time of COVID. So they stay in Taiwan and I can do in-person interview with them. So COVID have some positive impacts on my research. Okay, thank you. Okay. Okay, so my topic here is welding Taiwanese aquaculture technology, science diplomacy, experts, and know-how transfer. The science diplomacy, I call it, is really grassroots type of that. I will talk about it later. So this is Yu Zhengde, who wrote a series of articles in the blog called The Crossing, which is about foreign overseas experience of different Taiwanese. So when those articles came out back to 2017, it actually got a lot of noises around the people who have a certain kinds of experiences, overseas experiences. So here are some quotes I translate from his articles. For example, a fisher never forgets the taste of seawater, and also his engraved memories of seawater collected from different places. Fishes swim underwater in a borderless ocean. This time I have a taste of seawater in the Middle East. He was going to Saudi Arabia to become a consultant of the government about maritime and also inland aquaculture there. Back to the mid-2010s. If I worked in a desert, would there be any worse environment in aquaculture? Will I become a world-class expert handling all environments? Or is that over my background knowledge? So Taiwan is really different from the the Saudi Arabia, Middle East aquaculture environment, and he would take the challenge, and he did take the challenge. And after a few years, he become now a seafood company owner, the CEO, and he has a lot to say about the seafood trade. For me, he became a very important involvement to me. Okay, anyways, that's another story. I can talk for 3 days. Okay, so next, in this 15-minute presentation, I'm talking about the continuity and changes of the generations of Taiwanese aquaculture engineers or the experts' experiences of technology transfer. But they actually targeting, but not limited to, the official diplomatic allies in the global south. That means I include Saudi Arabia not because it is now the official ally of Taiwan. They are no longer the one, but actually they still have the economic and the diplomatic ties in this way. So my working argument is Taiwanese aquaculture engineers as grassroots diplomats co-traveling with aquatic animals. I taking the post-humans thinking in this article, produce a politicized technoscape of cooperation. So political ecology and political economy stuff is still influencing my ongoing research here. So these experts actually have their own incentives for traveling or co-traveling with the aquatic animals, I call it, because they want to do technology transfer. They want to export the Taiwanese know-how to other parts of the world. They want to build a reputation, individual reputation or the state reputation. They want to do, they happen to do some cultural exchanges with the local people. They want to do business during or after their extension services sent by the government. They also somehow become the science diplomats in the Taiwan, diplomatic situation that Mark Harrison has addressed it earlier in another panel. So I actually wrote my paper, which could be included in a book, edited volume by Zhongyan Yuan, but it's in progress for the review. And some of the concepts that I cannot give you the detail here because of limit of time is about the transborder movement of human and also non-human atoms concerning their livelihoods and the political economy, and also how the experts actually translate the know-how to the local people and translate the local environment back to Taiwan, the cohorts or co-workers in Taiwan. Actually, I look into the agency in that kind of a sector. And also I treat the animals as moving objects that actually influence that kind of diplomatic relationships. And all of them are embedded in the global power relationship that we talk about Taiwan's situation in the world. And so I treat those aquatic species as boundary objects, actually shaping and mediate the nations. And also the mobile people can become homely, or they have their own life works during the time of keep moving and moving between countries in a very practical way. And also, I would like to just tell you that I try to decenter this Taiwan-centered aquaculture stuff. In Taiwan or in the world, we always think we always hear about the Taiwanese experts talking, oh, Taiwan is the best, back to the time in the 1980s or 1990s concerning aquaculture science and technology. But I know it's not the same case. Actually, all these countries develop their aquaculture technologies, but somehow they influence each other, and at the same time nurture the pride of Taiwanese aquaculturists in the world, because they know that, okay, back to home, I can say something. I have overseas experience. I have 国际观. Okay, so I'm better than you, Taiwanese. Okay. but I do take it in this way. Okay, so I research questions quickly. Stay here to explore the aquaculture engineers' life history and their know-how, and also to investigate the globalization of the know-how. Okay, and these are the diplomas looked inside my paper here, the engineers, the extension team members, and also the consultants employed by different government or businesses, and also the a typo here, TIE, the substitute civilian serviceman. There should be a 1-year service for the youngsters, young men who are interested in aquaculture and can go overseas to the global south to be the TIE. So they learn a lot there and become or work as the engineers later on. Okay, so this is Liu Yizhou, 中研院院士, who is the 巧萨之户, the father of the tiger prawn, and he told me that actually knowledge transfer is not about intellectual property rights back to the time of the 70s. They, as experts, engineers, or scientists, were eager to share the knowledge with the fish farmers. And I think it set the capstone for the engineers to know that we don't play the game of the IP stuff. We want to share the knowledge in the world. Yeah, and okay. And another background is Taiwan actually use a lot of the extension teams as a resource or the human resource to exert its soft power to the global south. So that's why they can go, these people can go some countries in the global south. And in my paper, I actually draw some evidence from archives and also documents and news, papers, reports, so on and so forth, and oral histories from my interviews. How to decide whether or not they do projects in a place includes some investigation. For example, here is a SWOT analysis of scientists from Fisheries Research Institute to Tuvalu, a Pacific island, exploring whether or not they can help developing millfish farming there. And they consider, for example, seawater resources, the available of millfish fries, the management skills there, the aquaculture know-how there, and hurricanes, the typhoon factors. And they consider the local costs of investing or operating extension stations. So you see the local staff earns quite little compared to the engineers from Taiwan because they know the know-how. And this the budget plans for setting up operation, a station there. You see air, water, power supply are very important. They want to build a nursery pool for the fries, and then to nurture, keep the broodstock, the mothers and the fathers of the shrimp, to keep reproducing fish fries or shrimp fries to make them so-called sustainable business in the local society, local economies. And actually, they also report that some places are not really good for intensive commercialized aquaculture. For example, this area, the AB one is the marsh, and another one has a hilly slope, and actually they suffer flooding. So the local people told them, no, don't do it here. It's a waste of time and money. Okay, so they have to consider the local conditions and local people's perspectives and experiences. And this is one informant of mine who is a dignified aquaculture engineer experienced in Saudi Arabia. He told me just one story here because of the time limit. The government or his supervisor in Saudi Arabia once invited him and his family to a banquet, a luxurious banquet, but not the Indian engineers. That told us that, okay, we Taiwanese are better than the other aquaculture experts. And when he left, his supervisor gave him a very luxurious watch as a gift. So these people actually have to know the local market very well. For example, in Honduras, actually people eat deep fried tilapia, but they don't like the muddy flavor just like the Taiwanese. So we have to nurture the kind of tilapia that contains these two kinds of muddy flavor. So they have to get used. They have to know the market well, both the domestic market or the export market. And they around some noise among those the people around the world about who succeeded to do a great on-site on-farm experiment. Actually, they suffer a lot about the unstable political situation also in the Middle East and in the global South, just like Southeast Asia and the Pacifics. And actually, this kind of experience, actually, we imported to Taiwan, and people in Taiwan, just like the young agriculture engineers, students, learn a lot about their overseas experience. They wanted to go outside of Taiwan to practice agriculture, to learn, and finally come back, just like Lü Zhengda, come back to Taiwan to start their business. That's a great prospect for them to extend the 国际观 international vision, skill set, and then come back to become a businessman or a consultant. So come back to my argument. Actually, the factors for transferring Taiwanese agricultural know-how, including all those factors that as an anthropologist, we take holistic perspective into account, right? And also, these experts actually rely on their sensory experience, hybrid knowledge, local and scientific knowledge, field experiences, professional insights to pursue a very down-to-earth innovation here. So their life works are shaped by the science diplomacy, and also their practices lubricates the science diplomacy in respect and know-how transfer. So thank you for those engineers sharing the pride with me here, and I share that pride with you here. Thank you.
But the last presentation here is by Frank Mouillard, who has made a pre-recording. Fittingly, he's talking about architecture, so going back into the past. So we've unearthed this recording about the history of Taiwan architecture, not architecture, archaeology. Thank you. Okay.
I am Frank Mouillard from the French School of Asian Studies and National Central University in Taiwan. And I'm delighted to participate in the 4th World Congress of Taiwan Studies and like to thank the organizer for inviting me. Today, I will present my research on Taiwan archaeology in the making, from state negligence to national prehistory. This is a sociological perspective on the making of modern Taiwan archaeology, and it comes from some question I had in my previous research on nationalism. I wanted to look at how Taiwan past and history is represented in Taiwan national history and narrative, especially beyond written history, meaning Austronesian prehistory. All those questions are linked to archaeology and how archaeology operates. So I start researching the impact of politics and nationalism on Taiwan archaeology and the writing of prehistory. We'll try to present that shortly. Now, first, some information about the state of Taiwan archaeology today. Taiwan archaeology is 126 years old, and since its modest start at the beginning of the Japanese colonization period, it has grown in the 21st century, mainly through the efforts of Taiwan professional archaeologists into an autonomous and internationally recognized discipline. It's quite an achievement, as I will show later. Democratic, post-colonial, and multicultural Taiwan is providing, since the 90s, a significant case of impressive scientific development in archaeological research and interpretation. But there are a number of challenges. First of all, the small size of the archaeological community. Taiwan archaeologists are only 55 to 60. This community is very small. It's mainly academic at Academia Sinica, in universities, museums, with a few local archaeological centers and private salvage archaeology companies. There's also 4 prehistory or archaeological museums created since 2000, and a Center for Underwater Archaeology has been established. It's some interesting development. But there is no national archaeological institution or foundation, like in South Korea. There is no national preventive archaeology institution, like in France. There is no network of central or local government archaeology center or archaeologists, like in Japan or France, and very limited number of stable archaeological jobs at the master level. So that shows a certain lack of state support, because archaeology is a discipline which requires relatively high level of funding for social science. It interferes and conflicts with land development and private profits due to the necessity to survey, document, and excavate all sites of historical or cultural significance. So it cannot operate well without significant state support. But the absolute and relative size of archaeological community in Taiwan, when you compare with other countries of a similar level of economic development, indicates a serious lack of state support for archaeology here. So it's not a problem of today only, it's a historical lack of state support. And one could say that archaeology is the neglected child of state scientific and educational policies of post-war Taiwan. And to understand why, we must look at history, the history of Taiwan and the history of Taiwan archaeology. So very rapidly, it's a simplified way, I would say the three prominent characteristics of Taiwan history. First, it's a series of colonial regime with three kinds of impact on archaeology. First, a structural impact on the modern time of society and the production of knowledge with long disregard for indigenous people, cultures, and history. It's also a colonialist archaeology and mentality and the lack of state support for research on Taiwan pre-colonial past. The second point is a modern cultural imbalance favoring elite or foreign high culture and the North at the expense of local culture, local past, and the South, the center, or the East, which is seen as less relevant or important. And third, that's the contemporary conflict of nationalism and national identities. And many specificities of Taiwan archaeology actually come from this history. So the history of Taiwan archaeology is being written with up to now very little on its social and political aspect. The main feature widely recognized is the triple institutional and scientific heritage, Japanese, Chinese, American, fused into the Taiwanese archaeological tradition since the 50s. There's also a general consensus on the main period of the history of Taiwan archaeology, from the Japanese period, with both historical content and dialogue with ethnology, the transition period from 45 to 49, with the transmission of Japanese heritage to Taiwanese students and Chinese researchers, then the Chinese academia-led period from 49 to 64, and the division of work between National Taiwan University, who is doing the local archaeology, meaning the Taiwan archaeology, whereas the Institute of History and Philology at Academia Sinica will do the real research on national archaeology, the Chinese archaeology, mainly based on the artifact brought in 1949. Then there's a double emphasis on China, meaning the study of Anyang artifact, and Taiwan from the mid-60s and the mid-80s. And finally, the pluralistic archaeology period since the mid-80s with multiple approaches and extension of research outside of Taiwan to Southeast Asia, the Pacific, Japan, Europe, and even South America, including also new region in China. So this pluralistic archaeology, I've seen a renewed interest in Austronesian prehistory in Taiwan that went together with the growing importance abroad of the out of Taiwan theory of Austronesian migration. There's also important new site discoveries in Taiwan that had a major role in changing academic and public perspective on Taiwan prehistory and pushing for better preservation of its archaeological heritage, including the jade-rich late Neolithic culture at Beinan in Taidong, or the Shosanhong late Middle Age site, which saw the first social movement to protect a prehistoric cultural heritage site, and the early Neolithic Nanguanli in Tainan, which shows the first cereal producing site found in the island. Other main feature in the last 40 years, the growing importance of rescue or salvage archaeology and the development of new subfields such as scientific archaeology, underwater archaeology, historical archaeology, and some research on indigenous people, late prehistory and protohistory. We also had a relative but still insufficient growth of the number of archaeology and some educational program. So there is improvement, there is progress, but it's still not enough. Why? So look at the specificities of Taiwan archaeology and a summary. First, it's long been on the margin of the Chinese cultural world, and Taiwan prehistory was never of great importance or interest for Chinese archaeology. And we had a heavy post-war Chinese nationalism. So that has a strong impact on the first 20 to 30 years after the Second World War. And then we see a late emergence of the archaeology of Taiwan per se, out of a colonial or Chinese local archaeology, with the major impact of two archaeologists of Taiwanese background to shift the focus toward Taiwan prehistory, namely Song Wenxun at NTU and Zhang Guangzhi, who was at that time teaching at Yale and Harvard. There's also Taiwan prehistory has a unique relevance for Southeast Asia and Pacific archaeology due to the out of Taiwan theory. And at the same time, it's still very neglected in national discourse and readings of Taiwan history. Why? First, there is a disconnect between Taiwan prehistory, which is mainly Austronesian, and Han people's sense of history. There's a lack of impressive site and monument. There's a lack of interest and support for Taiwan archaeology from historians in Taiwan. There's a lack of public education in school books or training of history teacher in Taiwan, archaeology or prehistory. And once again, finally, the lack of a state or a nation state that actively support archaeology and provide resource and leadership, which has been seen as absolutely necessary to develop any archaeology in a given country. So the type of archaeology conducted in Taiwan is mainly belong to the type of colonialist archaeology. And there's also the dual influence of Chinese traditional humanities and US social sciences that have profoundly influenced Taiwan archaeology. First, in China, archaeology has long been seen as an auxiliary discipline serving historians to prove the validity of ancient texts. And if you have no text, like in Austronesian prehistory, then you don't much need archaeology. And also the dominant US perspective toward Native American or indigenous people. Those people don't have text, so they don't have history, they only have culture. And so their study is part of anthropology. As a result, US archaeology was long part of a full field anthropology, even if it's not much in practice anymore. There's also the impact of the American processual archaeology of the 50s and the 60s, where archaeology is seen as a scientific discipline and not belonging to humanities and history, and everything has to be studied locally and anthropologically. The result is in anthropologization and dehistoricization of indigenous people in history, both in the US and in Taiwan. Also, contemporary archaeology and more scientific and isolated from society and history, many done in laboratory. At the opposite, we see in Taiwan a continuous effort by archaeologists to integrate Austronesian prehistory in Taiwan historical narrative, including national discourse. And that's why we have to talk again about nationalism. The link between archaeology and nationalism are recognized as universal and probably unavoidable, with both potential positive and negative effect. Many research has been done on this topic in East Asian countries, Japan, Korea, China, Vietnam, but almost none on Taiwan. There is in Taiwan almost no public discussion about nationalism and colonialism in Taiwan archaeology. Some possible factors. First, the internal conflict between two nationalisms in the nationalist debate is not yet fully resolved. There's a persistence of cultural Chinese nationalism in elite and educational circles. There's also the fear of being criticized of professional repercussion if you raise this sensitive topic. There's a strong attachment to processual archaeology and its scientific ideology that refute any politic influence. There's also directly a rejection of this political influence of research. And there's this Han people-centered history with still dominant and largely unrecognized situation of structural colonialism. As a result, Chinese and Taiwanese archaeologists are working on Austronesian prehistory in a way on other people's past, to quote again Glover. As a result, in Taiwan, there is a development of very interesting non-nationalist archaeology since the 80s, which can be seen as a positive outcome. But the debate about Taiwan history and its model of national origin is probably necessary. Ikawa-Smith proposed 3 models of national origin construction in East Asia: the indigenous development model, the continuity with assimilation model, the single ancestral antecedent model, but none are reflecting or adapted to the Taiwan case, where we have modern settlement colonialism, we have the contemporary rise of a new national identity based on modern political history, and we have the presence of non-assimilated indigenous people directly linked to the country prehistory. As a fact, Taiwan's situation is similar to New World country of the Americas and the Pacific. It's a new society and nation of mixed colonists, immigrants with multiple histories and culture, and indigenous people and their long prehistory. It's still in a situation of structural colonialism toward indigenous people, like in the USA, Canada, and New Zealand. And there's a persistent struggle in building a national history in today's era of democratization, multiculturalism, and indigenous rights. So when we're talking about writing Taiwan national prehistory, there's a certain number of challenges. First is the challenge of all New World society regarding history, so including Taiwan. And I'm going to quote from Stephen Lexon, one of the most interesting American archaeologists working on southwest of the United States. And he said, we must recognize that the New World really had history, the same sort of history we take for granted in the Old World. This seems obvious, but I submit that American anthropological archaeology has labored for over a century to effectively deny such history. But absent archaeological input, world history ignored the New World before the 16th century because historians need documents, and most of the New World lack that class of evidence. That's a very important challenge. The second, and it's linked to the first, is the question of archaeology of indigenous people or indigenous archaeology that support the integration, the participation of indigenous people in archaeological research, including their perspective on the past. This indigenous archaeology doesn't exist yet in Taiwan. It has not been recognized as an issue or an approach, although many of its concerns are already shared and practiced by archaeologists, especially the younger generation. The third challenge is the challenge of the state and cultural elite identification with great civilization, past, and archaeology. Here, the Taiwan situation is similar to France, where there is a lack of recognition of its own barbaric origin and civilization. France is affected by a false sense of origin, with its elite long neglecting France's own prehistory in favor of the prehistory and history of the great civilization of antiquity, Mesopotamia, Egypt, Greece, Rome. And I quote here Jean-Paul Demoule, one of the most important French archaeologists. And in Taiwan, we have the similar disconnect between the state elite and historian. We are very interested in other or great civilization, past and archaeology, versus the prehistoric reality of Taiwan. And the similar hegemony of written source history and the similar obsession with those great ancient civilizations. So I'm trying, sorry. So there's a number of questions we have to raise if we want to talk about the issue of national archaeology and prehistory. So first, what kind of archaeology can be supported by the nation state, the state, without being nationalist? With the high level of funding, institution, and cultural heritage work needed by archaeology, is a purely scientific discourse for archaeology sufficient or viable? Intellectual and scientific argument for financing archaeology seem very lightweight when competing with other economic, social, and scientific needs and priorities under a relatively underfunded state as we have in Taiwan. So how to build an elite and public interest for Taiwan prehistory and archaeology? Can we convince the state and the people of the importance of archaeology and the necessity to fund and expand it without a national discourse on the past that include prehistory? Then, if we accept that, which national discourse on the past has to be written in an era of democracy and multiculturalism? And how to integrate indigenous people in this national discourse on the past while recognizing their right and their perspective? So I will suggest some possible direction as a conclusion. First, connection. We have to connect archaeology to the real society, to the local society, and to issues relevant to contemporary society. Environment, gender, colonial history, social and political organization, migration, multiculturalism, globalization, indigenous history. But we need to tell a story, many stories, human-centered stories related to social society's values and interests, and not just presenting a series of excavated artifacts with scientific description, which require a post-processual archaeology that reintegrate history and build narratives. Second point, finance. We need more money. New salvage archaeology rules are needed with funding directly linked to land development, leading to well-funded and massive preventive archaeology, as has been done in different countries, like in France, and which has been a game changer to uncover French prehistory. Third, indigenous. We need to develop a system-based integration of indigenous people in archaeology with training, outreach, and finance education paths on the model of other New World society, like in the US, Canada, and New Zealand. And finally, recognition, recognizing the need to build narrative and a national history based on the Taiwanese territory, and which fully include Austrasian history and culture. With that, maybe we can shape from the state negligence to a potential Taiwan national prehistory. Thank you.
Okay, Yiqing, we're back to you now. We have about 10 minutes for you to wrap up your presentation. So yeah, I encourage you to be as succinct as you can. And then I want to save time for comments and questions for the rest. The floor is yours.
The topic for today, the ocean fishing village tourism and national imagination in Taiwan, is part of Professor Arqing Xiao and my co-authored book called Experiencing the Local, the Ocean Fishing Village Tourism and National Imagination in Taiwan. And we are working on a Chinese version, and hopefully there will be an English version in the future. And this is a bluefin tuna mascot in the 2020 Pingdong Bluefin Tuna Cultural Festival. So that's our topic today. Please next. And we can see, we start with the flourish of fishing tourism, especially the fishing cultural festivals in Taiwan from 1997 till present. So in the map of Taiwan, we see regions, colored regions illustrated with Chinese. And these are all kind of fishing cultural festivals starting from the 1997. And tracing their origin, it was because of the community construction movement and the one town, one product policy that encouraged the regional government and the civil society to propose such fishing cultural festivals for revitalizing the fishing village economy. And the naming logic is placed as the name of the place, the fish species or fishing methods, plus the festival. So we can see this is a poster of the Pingdong Bluefin Tuna Cultural Festival. And please next. And this is a Nanfangao mackerel festival. We see people carrying their mackerel guard. And it has been held from 1997 till present in Yilan. And on the right side is Jinsang fisher people performing fire fishing methods to attract fishes. And these are all part of the fishing tourism here in Taiwan. Okay, please next. So what are the significance of the revitalizing of fishing culture tourism in Taiwan? In fact, when we see Chen Shuibian, the former president, and Su Jiaquan, the former Pingdong governor, they carried a bluefin tuna from the fishing ports to the fish market to demonstrate a kind of political purpose here. And that will be our topic and research question here. What are the political purposes for central administrations such as Chen Shuibian and the following Ma Ying-jeou or even Tsai Ing-wen for developing the fishing tourism in Taiwan? And next, these are all kind of fishes promoted in Taiwan: the bluefin tuna in Pingdong, mackerel in Yilan, Nanfangao, and squids in Keelung, grouper in Kaohsiung, and milkfish in Tainan. We see this is Huang Weizhe, the Tainan mayor. Okay, next. I will just skip through. And next. Next. Okay, this is our research map. We are investigating the maritime nation discourse and the maritime Taiwan discourse proposed by Chen Shuibian and following Ma Ying-jeou and Tsai Ing-wen, Su Zhenchang, and we will focus on fishery tourism here today. And next. So we start from Chen Shuibian and Lü Xiulian. And Chen Shuibian and Lü Xiulian had proposed their building an ocean country, Haiyang Liguo initiator, and they had encompassed Taiwan's maritime history, soft power diplomacy, and marine recreations to build their ideal ocean country. And in terms of fishing culture festivals, Chen Shuibian had developed two routes to fulfill his political purpose. The first is to articulate the economic to the political. So he regarded fisher people as pioneers of maritime nation and the bluefin tuna as the spirits that Taiwan people as a maritime nation people need to develop. That includes to fight with the ocean with perseverance and with wisdom and eager to take in challenges. And also Chen Shuibian had developed fishery industries and cultures as nation branding under globalization pressure. So he always addressed that the bluefin tuna in Pingdong is the pride of Taiwan and the product of Taiwan. And other than bluefin tuna, he also addressed on swordfish and the groupers. So when in Chen Shuibian's presidency, he had always addressed the specific fishes as the Taiwanese brand under global pressure. And he had developed macro and micro historical narratives. For example, he always contrasts the Kuomintang dictatorship with the democratic DDP governors because the sea was banned in the Kuomintang sea ban period. And after the democratization of Taiwan, Chen Shuibian has initiated the open sea policy. So to make a contrast between the former dictatorship and the open democracy now. And he also authenticated his ocean country with nostalgic fish memory, appealing to Taiwanese people's memory, childhood memory for eating milkfish. And he also proposed a romanticized ocean dream. Next. So this is when Chen Shuibian attended the Pingdong Bluefin Tuna Festival. Next. I'll just skip next. And this is Lü Xiulian also participated in. What's significant here is that in Lü Xiulian's discourse, she is referring to a continental China as the political other that Taiwanese people need to distance from. So she said that we must develop the maritime spirit, taking risks and eager to face challenges. And this is also the soft nation power of Taiwan. We may not need to move westward. Westward meaning China, but we must look ahead to the east. So we are moving toward the Pacific Ocean with fisher peoples as the political analogy. Next. And we are moving on to Ma Ying-jeou and Wu Dunyi's Blue Revolution. And I will just skip to the rupture here because Ma Ying-jeou keep on branding the local fishing tourism as a nation brand. But the rupture here is very important because Ma Ying-jeou has a different political purpose in his Blue Revolution. He wants to build a Chinese-centered nationalism in contrast with Chen Shuibian's Taiwan-centered nationalism. And during Ma Ying-jeou's presidency, there are several international disputes. The most important one is the September 25th Baodiao movement initiated by Nanfangao fisher people. In 2012 April, the Tokyo governor wanted to buy the Diaoyutai Islands, and the Nanfangao people, seeing such as a threat to their fishing rights, just voyaged to the Diaoyutai Islands to protest. And 2 days later, Ma Ying-jeou meet with these fisher people and praised their patriotism and for their eager to protest the sovereignty of the Republic of China. So here, Ma Ying-jeou articulate Nanfangao people's protection of their fishing rights as a patriotic sovereignty rights. So here we see a transform of a pure instrumental fishing rights to a more politicalized sovereignty rights. And also, Ma Ying-jeou addressed the Bao Diao legacy of the 1970s, addressing to a Chinese-centered nationalism again. So here we can see that from the two governors, they are same pioneer fisher peoples, but they have different political purposes. And the imagined rivals have changed as well from China to Japan. Next. Next. So this is okay. So this is what Wu Dunyi said in the Nanfang Ao Macro Festival. He addressed Nanfang Ao fisher people's action as love the hometown, love the country, and love the sovereignty actions. So here we can see again the transform from economic fishing rights protection to love the hometown and a patriotism action. Okay, next. Okay, we'll just move to Tsai Ing-wen's Salute to the Seas. The point here is that Tsai Ing-wen did not address on fishing tourism a lot, but it was the regional articulations of the DPP local governments, including like Kaohsiung, Keelung, Tainan, that articulate the fishing tourism to the maritime nation discourse. Okay, next, and next, sorry. So the precursor is the Kaohsiung as the ocean city. We will see how this discourse. Please next. And next. Okay, this is Frank Hsieh in his 2004. He said that Taiwan is a maritime country and Kaohsiung the ocean capital, a sea harbor. And we can see that he started to account for what they have: fishing industries, squids and tunas, offshore and distant water fisheries, maritime industry. So in that way, because of the concretized and materialized landscapes and built environment, Kaohsiung is qualified as the authentic ocean capital, thus contribute to the building of an ocean country. And also, Chen Ju said that in 2017, Chen Ju said that Kaohsiung occupies a crucial position in distant water fishing industry. It is also the hometown of groupers and the milkfish. From north to south, Kaohsiung possesses 65 or so coastline and 7 fishery associations, the most in Taiwan. Okay, next. So we see a strategy here. The Kaohsiung governors are materializing and authenticating the ocean city with fishing and marine resources, and they are constructing an oceanized sense of place by a strategy called selective construction of the landscapes. So here we see that after 2010, the whole old Kaohsiung County was integrated to the whole Kaohsiung city. So as we see from Chen Ju's discourse, the whole mountain areas, including Aboriginal culture or Hakka cultures and the badland landscapes, are suspended, and only the blue spots here, the ocean, the coastline, the fishes, are incorporated into her oceanized place discourse. So in that way, by suspending the forests and other landscapes to construct an oceanized sense of place is what the regional governors are doing in during 2018 to 2020. Next. So this is also regional articulation. For example, Huang Weizhe, the Tainan mayor, said that the maritime spirits of challenging and taking risks of people, and Tainan has a long coastline and maritime culture champion other places in Taiwan. So Tainan as an ocean capital. So we can see there's a contending process for champion other regions to become the ocean capital, whether it to be Kaohsiung or Tainan here. And even Lin Youchang, the Keelung governor, said the same thing. He wanted Keelung to be the ocean gate of the maritime Taiwan. And also Zheng Wenchan had also participated in. He said that we should become a fisherman island where everyone works together to protect and watch over our precious marine resources. This is also a response to the global pressure of marine protection initiative. Okay, next. So this is more articulation of maritime Taiwan discourse from the civil society, but we will just skip this. And this is from the, okay. And the last one is our contribution and future research. First is that the maritime nation discourse is a new banal form of Taiwanese nationalism. In the past, the nationalism the pro-Taiwanese nationalism is a politicalized one, which targeted on the institutionalized politics, and their narrative are the repression of the Kuomintang dictatorship, authenticating a sorrowful past as collective memory, including the February 28th incidents and the White Terror period. But this new battlefront of Taiwanese nationalism focus on the politics of everyday life of Taiwan people. Because of the open sea policy, people are able to come closer to the ocean, and they can attend to the fishing tourism and fishing cultural festivals. So the narrative is from the dictatorship sea ban policy to a more democratic open sea policy that everyone and the civil society could participate in. So the method of authentication starting from Chen Shui-bian is to build the intimacy between Taiwan people and ocean with a romanticized and nostalgic landscape, the ocean landscape and the fishery landscape. And last is our theoretical thought. First, the same discourse moments may have varied political purposes. So the fisher people are constructed as pioneers, bringing Taiwanese people away from China by Chen Shui-bian administrations. But for Ma Ying-jeou, fisher people are fighters against the Japanese government to protect the sovereignty of the Republic of China. And also, articulation and the authentication of a maritime nationalism is a contending process between different political parties and between the regions. Also, the last is that we can see there's also a past-dependent effects and contingency of political discourse, because Chen Shui-bian and Liu Xiulian has set the agenda of maritime nation discourse. The followers need to respond or support their discourse. So we may need to pay more attention on the temporal and sequential aspects of discourse. And that's all of my presentation. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Yicheng, and thanks for your brevity with the presentation as well. I'd invite our two in-person panelists to come up front. And Frank will invite to be with us in spirit. So let me open it up to our audience. Do we have any questions for our panelists today, or questions or comments? Yeah, Ian, would you like to come up?
Thanks so much to all three of you. I want to ask a question inspired by a dialogue that I think could happen between the very exciting projects of Eric and Yicheng, which is to say, of course, you're both talking about fish. Now, Eric was using, he gestured towards Latour and perhaps the agency of non-human actors or more than human actors, but didn't get it, I guess, the geopolitical or other kind of political implications of what your projects are. I'd love to hear more about that. And conversely, for Yicheng, you spend a lot of wonderful time. I learned a lot about how individual named actors, mayors, magistrates, presidents, and so on, nationalize fish now in different ways. I'm wondering, are the fish cooperative? Do the fish participate themselves? What is their agency? Do they get in the way? Do they swim in the wrong direction? And here I'm being playful with I suppose a multi-species perspective that Eric introduced, wondering do they complicate these nationalizing projects of the different administrations that you cover? Thanks.
Yicheng, let's have you respond first, and then we'll go to Eric.
Okay. In our Chinese book, there is a chapter discussing the non-human agency, the fish, and there are several fishes that would be the most icon for Taiwanese nationalist fish. For example, the milkfish. The agency lies that the milkfish has been fish from the Zheng Chenggong period, so it has been the most symbolic fish for Taiwan, and yes, we also discuss some of the material, such as the fishing methods, the fishing tools, to represent that the articulation of maritime nation is not only on the discourse aspects, but built upon the landscape and built environment of the history of fishing practices in Taiwan. And I hope we will have a more more clear explanation in the future with an English version of our book. And that's it.
Thank you, Yi Chen and Dr. Xiao's prospective book writing, and I'm really interested in that one because I want to write one about fish or seafood festival. But you take it. Thank you very much. And I would like to answer Ian's really fascinating question about the agency of the fish. And actually, I always joke that in Taiwan there are 3 hometowns for groupers, around 4 hometowns for male fish. So where are their hometowns actually? and that Yi Chen has mentioned actually male fish came to Taiwan maybe during the Zheng Chenggong's period, but in aquaculture, we always talk about it, and we have about 3 or other stories about the hometown of millfish. Probably, millfish is not native to Taiwan because no adult fish actually lives in Taiwan. I mean, across the coastline, they swim from Indonesia or the Pacific love to Taiwan and spawn. That means give birth to their babies and then they go back to the tropical areas. And when we talk about the hometown of millfish, there's something about the national identity Yi Chen has addressed about it, and also regional identity. Tainan always claimed that they should be the hometown for millfish, but at the same time, back to centuries, actually Tainan, Jiayi, and even southern parts of Yunnan, we have evidence about the aquaculture, the millfish farming. And about groupers, there are lots of other stories that we can tell. And actually, I feel it is kind of the competitions between townships and cities to make sure that they are hometown of something. This is totally related to the community building and also the 一乡一特色 scheme when we talk about festivals organizations in Taiwan. So I'm back to Ian's question on my paper. Due to the time limit, I didn't address much about the fish. Actually, I addressed the human experiences, and I call those fishes the boundary objects and co-travelers with the people because they actually bring several specific kinds of aquatic animals to the other parts of the world. For example, tiger prawn, tilapia, and also tiger prawn, tilapia, red tilapia. Which is not originated in Taiwan, but kind of discovered and improved in Taiwanese Aquatic Research Institute. And they try to introduce these kind of species to the global south because they're easy to grow, they fit in the domestic market, and actually in some places they can find the fries or the eggs there. So it's about the technical stuff here. And this fish biological meteorology actually affects the people's, the aquaculture experts' practical practices in the local area they visit. I have some examples here on my paper. For example, in one example, they tried to propagate tiger prawns in the Middle East, but they found that the salinity and the temperatures are not really fitting the biologies. So they actually find the Indian prawn in the West Sea more feasible for intensive farming aquaculture there. So they shift to the local species actually. So they feel like the pride is actually not that, oh, we transfer all the know-hows from Taiwan to the other parts of the world, but also we adapt to the local environment. Thank you.
Yi Chen, you wanted to follow up on that? Is that right?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Okay. This is also another kind of fish called mullet, which swam from China to Taiwan in the winter. And this kind of fish, mullet, had also been raised, caught in Taiwan for hundreds of years. And there's a mutual trusteeship between mullet and the fisher people as a legend in regions that promote the mullet fish. And so this kind of swimming from China to Taiwan had also been articulated as a kind of nationalism, fish nationalism, that the agency of fish would contribute to the discourse of maritime Taiwan. And that's a short response. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Are there any other questions about fish? Yes, Russell, please come up. And all this talk about aquaculture and fish is making me hope we have sashimi for dinner tonight, if nothing else.
I was not expecting to encounter so many fish experts, so I'm going to take advantage of the fact that we do have two here to ask you a question, perhaps a general one to both our fish experts, and then one more specific. And one has to do with the KMT C-band that Ichan referred to earlier. And could you just kind of go over what that was? I mean, what that entailed? What was the specifics of that C-band and the significance of the transition to the open sea policy of the DPP? I mean, the framing of it suggested that was obviously a political motivation for the DPP to do so. And so perhaps kind of explaining a bit in terms of what you saw, what was the sort of the political implications of that. I'm also interested in specifically as to the reference to the KMT's emphasis on the mackerel industry as opposed to perhaps the grouper and the bluefin industry in the South. And I wondered whether or not there are differences in terms of how the industries are aligned politically amongst along partisan line, with whether or not the bluefin industries and the grouper industries are more DPP oriented, and then the macro industry perhaps is more KMT oriented, and whether or not there are some kind of similar, whether there are sort of alignments there. And finally, because it's in the news, I'm sure both of you have heard, and many perhaps in the room have heard that China has recently instituted a ban on gropers incoming to the PRC, importing to the PRC. And I noticed that Pingdong, of course, is the one of the sort of the hometowns, perhaps the hometown of gropers, and it strikes me as in that this was obviously a politically motivated decision, and what your assessments in terms of the the political ramifications of these types of actions taken by the PRC on the Taiwanese attitudes on these matters. Thanks.
Okay, Yicheng, you want to take that first, and then we'll go to Eric. I'll give you about a minute and a half each, if you can keep it to that. Oh, can you unmute yourself as well?
Oh, yes.
Great.
Okay, so in terms of the C-band from the Kuomintang peer dictatorship, the Kuomintang had built the coastline as military spots to defend the invasion of China. So ordinary people cannot approach the oceans, otherwise they will be fined or sent to prison. And so people, before the democratization of Taiwan and before the open sea policy, people in Taiwan are very unfamiliar with the ocean, and they fear the ocean. They will ask their children to distance themselves from the ocean. So there's an alienation between Taiwanese people and the ocean during the C-band period. And when Li Denghui and Chen Shuibian gradually opened the sea, they aimed to build a more intimacy between Taiwanese people and the ocean. And of course, this has a political implication for building a maritime nation, to build the relationship between Taiwan and the ocean, to contrast the maritime Taiwan nationalism with the continental Chinese nationalism. So that's a short response to the C-band and the open sea policy. Oh, and the open sea policy, including open up marine recreations, and of course the fishing cultural festivals, has integrated this kind of marine recreations, such as surfing or sea diving. These kind of activities are also incorporated in the fishing cultural festivals to provide opportunities for Taiwanese people to intimidate and approach to the ocean. And to the second, more specific problem about fishing industries, I would say that there are always political implications here. For example, during the Ma Ying-jeou period, the Kuomintang administrations tried to sell groupers and milkfish to China and to promote their so-called blue ocean economy. But when Tsai Ing-wen had addressed the presidency, China banned the milkfish, and so the Tsai Ing-wen did not continue the milkfish selling to China, and they are criticizing. There are also critics saying that there are political implications from the fishing trade between China and Taiwan. But there are also people saying that the taste of milkfish is not the Chinese people did not like the taste of the milkfish. So that's a more market explanation instead of a politicalized one. But this kind of market explanation is also a politicalized explanation, because there are also pro-independent writers saying that milkfish is the flavor of Taiwanese people. In response to the China's response to the milkfish, some independent writers claimed that the milkfish is not the flavor of Chinese people. So in that way, he built upon that the linkage between Taiwan and a specific kind of taste. That is the taste of milkfish, which is also nationalized between the trade of Taiwan and China. And that's my response. Thank you.
Okay, so time is limited. I have a whole dissertation talking about grouper and milkfish, so you can read it, and I keep publishing it in English because then Lev can do an analysis about whether or not Taiwan studies is related to fisheries. Okay, so because time is limited, just one additional note is that I think tourism is really important about talking about fishing sectors development nowadays, because when the community development kind of stuff going on, the fisheries agencies and the COA, the Council of Agriculture, no matter which party takes charge of it, actually turning every fishing resources into touristic resources, so that help us to become the consumers of those local parts. We have seafoods in every pot nowadays. No, okay. So I left some time for Nev to answer some questions.
Okay, in the interest of time, I'm going to exercise chair's prerogative and ask a very short question, very descriptive question of Lev. Book chapters. In Taiwan studies, edited book volumes are actually a surprisingly important, large part of our field. To what extent are you able to pick up individual book chapters in this database? And is that somehow skewing your results, especially older ones that aren't open access, that aren't necessarily picked up in any kind of journal database?
Shout out to my co-author, Adrian Rauschfleisch, who is up and awake on Twitter right now, messaging me the answer. They don't get cited in the co-citation analysis that we did. They do not. So they are likely left out. We picked them up as cited. And yes, they do. They do get cited and are included. Thanks. Oh, no.
So did they go through those journal articles to see whether or not a book
they are not as prominent, is Adrian's response. Thank you, Adrian.
All right. With that, yes, sorry. With that, let's call this meeting to a close. Thanks all for your attention.